Thank you very much. Thank you so much for the invitation. Good morning and good evening. I send you greetings from Costa Rica, where I am, and, and I'm really honored and happy to be here and get to know you all. I'm originally from Brazil, from Brasilia, but I have been living here in Costa Rica for over 26 years, working with the Earth Charter Initiative. I'm gonna share presentation and let me know if you can see. Can you see it? I suppose so. Yes. Okay, I'll briefly present to you how the Earth Charter has been used or brought to education for sustainable development and education for global citizenship. So I'll try to briefly share with you, give you the context on how to bring values and principles of sustainability and global citizenship to education through the lenses of the Earth Charter. And of course, I'm going to share a little bit of what is the Earth Charter all about. And again, I'm speaking with you from the Earth Charter International, the University for Peace, and the work we do under the framework of the UNESCO Chair on Education for Sustainable Development with the Earth Charter. And this is our education center that is located here in Costa Rica. Hopefully one day, any one of you could come and visit us. So the focus of our work over the past 15 years or more has been on that intersection between sustainability, what is sustainability, what the values and principles of sustainability are, and what the relationship of the values and principles of sustainability with the sense of the concept of global citizenship, and how to bring that into education. Therefore, our UNESCO chair and the work we have been doing is focused in that intersection between sustainability, global citizenship, values, and education. And with that, we have been doing research and training in that intersection. So let me share with you that more or less every 10 years, UNESCO brings together a global forum on education. And the purpose of that global forum on education is to bring ministers of education from all over the world, the member states, to set the agenda of education priorities over certain years, over a certain number of years. So the last education forum of UNESCO took place in May 2015 in Incheon in South Korea. And that education forum set what the UNESCO sees as the priority until 2030 for education worldwide and in terms of collaboration, international collaboration around education. And I wanted to emphasize or highlight two paragraphs that you may find in this Incheon Declaration and this plan of action that is articulated here. One is that, of course, they focus this current global education agenda on quality education. 20 years ago, the focus and the priority was in education for all, was to ensure access to education. But since 2015, the focus has been on how can we improve the quality of education. But education for sustainable development and global citizenship is also very much part of that agenda currently. But I want to highlight here the focus on values. As you can see in paragraph 63 of this declaration and document states the international community and UNESCO commits to seek ways to provide learners with opportunities to acquire throughout life the knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes that are needed to build peaceful, healthy, and sustainable development. And in paragraph 22 of the same document states that quality education includes because the whole document it emphasizes the importance to ensure more quality education for all. And therefore they say, what's quality education? And they state that quality education includes the development of those skills, values, attitudes, and knowledge that enable citizens to lead healthy and fulfilled lives, make informed decisions, and respond to local and global challenges. But throughout the document, they also emphasize the importance of education for sustainable development and education for global citizenship, and that takes place through a values and examination and clarification. That fundamentally, education for sustainability, ESD, is fundamentally about values education. So the question could be, what are the values and principles of sustainability and global citizenship? Another thing that is very much part of the priority of the UNESCO agenda currently is to ensure that education for sustainable development is incorporated in all levels of learning. And ESD, Education for Sustainable Development, consists, according to UNESCO, in educating to generate social transformation with the objective to create more sustainable societies. And the goal of the work of UNESCO around ESD is to incorporate the values inherent to sustainability in all aspects of learning. So when the question comes of what are the values and principles of sustainability, we can find them articulated, not only the values and principles of sustainability, but also of global citizenship. We can see that or find them clearly articulated in the Earth Charter. And the Earth Charter is offered to many people to embrace it, embrace as institutions, individuals, or schools or universities as an ethical reference or as an ethical compass, an ethical reference or an ethical compass that can guide us towards a more just, sustainable, and peaceful world. It could serve as a map that identifies the way towards a more sustainable society. So in 2003 and 2019, UNESCO adopted 2 resolutions in relation to the Earth Charter. In these 2 resolutions, basically UNESCO emphasizes or agrees or adopts the idea that the understanding that they recognize the Earth Charter as an important educational instrument and as an ethical framework for sustainable development. And they recommend member states and institutions to use the Earth Charter as an educational instrument. So when we look at many documents and they emphasize, such as UN documents, the importance of incorporating the values and principles of sustainability in education, the question that could come to our mind is whether we are really cultivating a culture of care and respect for the large living world in the mainstream education, or are we nurturing implicitly or explicitly values of unsustainability through the education system? If we see the world as we are now currently living, with the current challenges of climate change, environmental degradation, conflict, and it's to a certain extent growing intolerance with the different ones, I think we could maybe question what has been the role of education systems and institutions in more or less being in a vacuum in terms of cultivating the values of care or a culture of peace or a culture of care and respect for the large living world. And therefore, I think education institutions have to take on that key protagonist role as main drivers of social transformation, key and protagonist role as key drivers towards sustainability. And therefore the question comes, how to incorporate values and principles of sustainability and global citizenship in processes of education and learning, and what are those ethical references? And therefore, I think that's where we, in the Earth Charter, the work we have been doing in terms of research and training, we have selected a number of resources that have been used widely in terms of how the Earth Charter can be used as an educational tool. So the first one I'm going to share with you here, and I will subsequently send to you the link in the chat box here, is a document that you can find just by Googling it, actually. It's called A Guide for Using the Earth Charter in Education. This document was launched in a UNESCO conference back in 2009, and it's translated in many languages and easily accessible and available in the internet. We have also produced and launched a document that it's basically a teacher's guide on educating for sustainable lifestyle with the Earth Charter. And it can easily be found also as an instrument. It was actually developed for Costa Rica primary schools. And there is one that is a guide for teachers, and another one is for a booklet for students. But basically this guidebook offers ideas of how to incorporate this notion of sustainability through the values and principles of the Earth Charter in classes of mathematics, social studies, science, language, and etc. Similarly, we also have developed a material called Bringing Sustainability into Classrooms. Is a Earth Charter, also an Earth Charter guidebook for teachers that is not limited to primary school teachers as the previous one, but it offers also general guidelines, ideas, and examples of how the Earth Charter can be used in education. Anyway, we have also selected a huge Earth Charter bibliography that can be found in our website, and numerous examples. I'll just mention two here, and a third one in the next slide. For instance, the Pictures of Success is actually a project that was developed in the UK, and you can easily access that also by just Googling picturesofsuccess.org. And what they did is basically they linked each Earth Charter principle to an image and to a story. And the purpose here was to show that values and principles education doesn't have to be abstract. It can actually be connected to real life stories, real examples of stories that could stimulate in the learner a reflection about a specific situation and experience and link it with the values of the Earth Charter. There is an Earth Charter board game. There are also some stories about this that you can find in YouTube or in our website. It's basically a board game to show that we can cultivate the values and principles of sustainability as articulated in the Earth Charter in a fun way, in a playful way, again, through the effort of sharing stories of real life. The last example I wanted to briefly share with you is this app called Mapting, and it's basically an app that you can easily, freely download, and any school or any school teacher can use to engage the students or the learners, young or teenagers, to learn more about the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and the Earth Charter principles. But by engaging not only from a theoretical point of view, but if the schools commit to implement the values and principles of sustainability, as well as the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, this app can serve the teacher or the school when they open an account there to engage the students in implementing activities in each of the Sustainable Development Goals. So it serves as a sort of a social media to showcase what the school or the classroom is doing with regards to the SDGs. So this app is called Mapting. So I am actually going to end by briefly sharing the key ideas that we can find in the Earth Charter. So the core or at the heart of the Earth Charter, lies an ethic of care and respect. Care and respect for the community of life. So at the outset, the worldview that is articulated in the Earth Charter is a worldview that invites us to expand our sense of care and respect beyond ourselves, beyond our families, and beyond our nations and countries, to envision and to think that our sense of respect and care and responsibility has to do or to involve the large living world, beyond humans, and actually beyond humans that are beyond our own cultures, but also beyond humans in terms of involving the large living world, which is their charter calls the community of life. So each word that we can find in their charter, it was actually carefully thought and drafted through a process that took over 6 to 7 years with individuals and experts in all regions of the world and also different areas of knowledge. But the Earth Charter articulates 16 principles organized in 4 parts. The first one starts with this notion of respect and care for the community of life, which serves as the heart or the foundation of the rest of the Earth Charter. And it goes to Pillar 2, which articulates a number of values and principles under the notion of ecological integrity. Then Pillar 3 articulates values around or under the idea of social and economic justice. And it ends with a pillar on democracy, nonviolence, and peace. So it's important to emphasize here or highlight that their charter vision articulates a systemic approach, a systemic nature of all these challenges and aspirations of the human community. And therefore, each one of them is to see interdependent from one another. In our website, you can also find these little cards that can serve for any teacher, any school teacher, to stimulate dialogue with the students about what each value or each principle of their charter is all about. This is just to show you what you can find in Pillar 1, in Pillar 2 under ecological integrity, under Pillar 3 on social and economic justice. And again, each one of these icons is there, comes from actually an abstract vision, but to invite the learner to dialogue about the different views on the theory and practice, what the meaning behind each of these words, but also to envision how what happens when each one of these is practiced or is lived in a day-to-day life situation, but also what happens when there is a vacuum or when there is the opposite of these values and principles are existing in a given situation. So with this, I'm gonna express my gratitude for your time. I know I spoke a little bit longer and faster, but I wanted to give you an overview of their charter and basically present this to you as an instrument and as an invitation for any educator or any school. You are very much invited to embrace, adopt, and use it. And as I mentioned in our website and actually YouTube channel, you can also find a number of useful resources. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mirian. And Brother Vargas has a very specific submission to you as how can Montfort institutions be part of this process, or how can they link with the charter? There is a specific question that the Montfort institutions would like you to answer.
Well, I think as each school or the whole association of schools can express its commitment to use the Earth Charter. We call it a commitment or endorsement to the Earth Charter. And then you can start using it by incorporating it in your schools. Many schools have used it as an ethical reference to look at the school with a whole institutional approach. Whole institutional approach meaning how to incorporate these values and principles of sustainability and global citizenship that are articulated in the Earth Charter, but incorporate it in the curriculum, incorporate it through the pedagogical approach, in the school operations, meaning the actual management of the school, but also in the relation that the school establishes with the community where the school is located. The UNESCO calls it a whole institutional approach to ESD, to Education for Sustainable Development. I will be more than happy to follow up with more details on how this can happen, and above all, to share some of the experiences of how some schools have fully embraced the Earth Charter.
Yes. Okay. So actually, thank you so much for giving this these pointers, these specific pointers. But since we are talking about, you know, the emphasis now is more on values and an ethical compass. So when we are referring so so repeatedly towards an ethical compass, so that is something, you know, although we are talking about the sustainability goals, what is the ethical compass, I think, comes from our own innate tuning in with nature. So that is if once we are tuned into nature and to nature's round, so to say, I think many things will fall in place. And because we are talking about an ethical compass, I just want to mention here that about 4 years ago, we did a little bit of thinking on this, and we wrote an essay titled "Towards an Ethics of Permanence." And I think, I think one should think through that kind of thinking to say, okay, sustainability, yes, but towards permanence is what I wanted to just mention. And
it sounds beautiful.
Yes, there's an essay towards an ethics of permanence, and you could take a look at that at some point.
Yes. Well, this sounds beautiful, and actually part of my own research interest has been on how we can make values-based education not sound as theoretical or abstract, but transformative. We have been looking at pedagogical elements to make it happen in a way that it's not just about conversation on concept and theories, but how to spark interest in the learner, but also how to enable the learner to go through a transformative learning experience. And actually, the use of arts in storytelling and metaphor is one of the key elements that we have found that it's very useful when we want to generate a transformative learning experience. And sometimes we think about the use of art only for the art classes, but here we have actually experienced the use of art as a way to engage the learner in deep thinking and in expressing not only thinking but feelings through an artwork. And art has been really used largely. I have researched over 120 stories of good practices of uses of the Earth Charter in education, and the use of art in storytelling and metaphors is certainly there. But you mentioned about nurturing the connection with nature. And it's one of the key elements too, because the reality is that our society has become quite disconnected from our inner essence, and disconnected from nature, because there is a large part of our population now currently living in urban areas. And therefore, one of the key elements we have found is really making sure we help the learner connect with nature. Not only learn about science through the books in a cognitive way, but having this heart and mind connection through an experience with nature. And by doing that, is kind of a way to, not only the only way, but a way to cultivate and nurture this deep sense of belonging, or this deep sense of care and awareness for the community of life, awareness for the large living world. I think the task here, or the challenge, is to help young people think about how we relate to one another. How are we relating to one another? How we ought to relate, but not in an imposing or vertical way of teaching, but in using questions and using inquiry for the learner to think about what's happening with our relationships with our own selves, what's happening with our relationship with other people, with people from other cultures, what's happening with our relationship with nature and this human nature connection. So it's also there as part of our findings in terms of key pedagogical elements.
Yes, thank you very much again, Mirian. And this is only the beginning, and I'm sure Montfort institutions will continue their engagement with you. Thank you once more. Thank you so much.